Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I want to be sharing one book with you that has been absolutely instrumental in changing my life. We're going to be looking at 3 of my biggest takeaways from it, so let's get started. If you're new to my channel, hi, I'm Rebecca Taylor, former school psychologist turned full-time fiction writer who also happens to work as a flight attendant. On my channel, you get a mix of book reviews, information about writing, and a little bit of travel thrown in for fun. But when I pulled this book back off my shelf, because I knew it was something that I definitely want to talk about on here, it was interesting because I flipped through it and I had the old receipt in here from when I first purchased this book, and I bought it back in 2016. And so, at that time, I have 2 children. My daughter was 12, my son would have been 11, and I was in the thick of it with regards to my school psychology career. Now, I was always writing books while I was working, but it was definitely something I sort of did on the side really early in the morning. Most of my day was taken up by my full-time job and, of course, raising my children and just everything else that kind of goes along with that. So I don't think at the time that I really was 100% sure that I wanted to leave my career at in school psychology, because it was something that I was really good at. It paid pretty well. I was very successful in it, but it did certainly cause me a lot of stress and required just so much cognitive energy that it really just sort of kept me from being able to pursue my writing career with the focus and the intensity with which I would have liked. And so, there was just kind of a big transition phase for me. And so, I thought it was really interesting that, that was when I picked up this book, because I would say that was really kind of the beginning of the shift for me, when I was starting to be aware that it's like, hey, I don't think I want to do this career anymore. And moving into, really kind of thinking about the possibility of like, can I do more with my writing career? Can I pursue that more regularly? And so this completely shifted my thinking at the time. That I can say absolutely for sure. And so the title of this book is The One Thing, The Surprisingly Simple Truth Behind Extraordinary Results, and it's by Garry Keller. So let's talk a little bit about this book. The essential premise of this book, when, at the very, very beginning, Garry is talking about how, he had a really successful business. It was doing really well. And, they had international business, they had domestic business, they were doing really, really well. And then things kind of started to go south. And he had a lot of problems, or what he perceived to be a lot of problems with his company. And he couldn't figure out how to solve them or what exactly was wrong. And so he explains in the book that he turned to a coach. Like, what do? You get some outside help, maybe a different perspective, some fresh eyes. Like, what are you seeing here? Is there some way that you can help me solve this problem? So essentially this coach did a deep dive onto, his entire business, and he came back and essentially said, look, it boils down to there are 14 key positions and people that if you change them over, that's going to basically solve all your problems. And, Garry says in the book, he's like, it can't be true. Like, it's way more complex than that. It can't just be 14 people and positions, and the coach said, trust me. And I think there's a line here that says basically says Jesus needed 12, you need 14. So I thought that was kind of funny. So he says that he decided to kind of trust what this coach was saying, and he fired himself as CEO and made his singular focus to be finding these right 14 people for these 14 positions, and that was his singular focus. And apparently within 3 years, the company was profitable again and had completely turned around. So he said that this was kind of like his wake-up call about like this idea of like when you make something your singular focus and direction, how it can have just this tremendous huge result, and that sometimes we are making problems more complex than they need to be. And that really is, it's like we're looking at too many different variables, when actually the truth is, the solution could be much more simple. And so that's basically how the book gets started. And I thought it was like a really good introduction into sort of seeing what sort of shaped his lens into, the creation of this book, and where his kind of thinking was coming from. So one of the things that he says pretty early on in the book, and I'm going to read this word for word because it's good, is, he's basically asking his team members when he's meeting with them and his one-on-ones, what is the one thing you can do this week such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary? And he says he came up with this because, he would have these meetings with people every week, and, they would come up with these list of things that they're going to be working on, for the week. And, invariably they would come back and they would kind of look over, okay, where are you with your projects? What's been working? What hasn't been working? And he would find again and again and again that, people on his team, they were getting a lot of things done every week, working really hard, very, very busy, getting stuff done, but they're not necessarily getting what would be the right things done, the things that are going to move the needle, the things that are going to have the greatest impact. And so then he started, when he's working with them, paring it down. Okay, so what are the 3 things that you're going to do this week? What are the 2 things that you can do this week? And then that eventually led to, what is the one thing that you can do this week such that by doing it, everything else becomes easier or unnecessary? So this leads me into my very first takeaway from this book. Extraordinary results are directly determined by how narrow you can make your focus. He goes on to share in the book that when he had huge success, he had narrowed his concentration to one thing, and when success was varied was because his focus had been varied as well. And so when I first got this book in 2016, my children were, sort of just coming out of elementary school, just getting ready to start middle school. I was in the middle of working a really busy school psychology job, and I'm trying to be a writer. And that's a lot in and of itself. But even worse than that, and why this book completely changed my life, was because I already had all of those things, and those were pretty non-negotiable things. So, don't think I'm saying that, this book, this one thing, so it's like, what is my one thing going to be? I can't stop being a mother. I can't stop being a school psychologist at the time. I couldn't. And I was unwilling to stop being a writer. But how I was making those things even more difficult was I was fracturing my focus and attention under each of those domains even further. And so what do I mean by that? So for example, it wasn't just enough that, I was a mom in it to win it, trying to be the best mom that I could be for my particular children. I would take on additional tasks with being a mother. And so what do I mean? If there was a field trip my kids were going on, I would volunteer to go on that field trip. If the PTA needed something, I would volunteer to serve that role on the PTA. If they were doing a fundraiser and they needed if they needed some kind of flyer or pamphlet put together, I would volunteer to build that for them. And so I'm taking on additional tasks under that umbrella of being a mom, which already has so many tasks, anyway, that go along with it. So I'm putting even more on my plate. When it came to school psychology, it's like, it's already incredibly busy. You have a tremendous amount of children on your caseload. There's a lot of testing, there's a lot of report writing, these sort of things. But then, somebody in the school would ask you to do something extra or take on, a committee or, volunteer for X, Y, and Z. And I would raise my hand and I would do those things. And so, you're making an already very busy job even busier by taking on more tasks. How that related to my writing, for example, is that, I wasn't just working on one book, I was working on 3 different books, and they were all in different genres. So you can see it's like my focus was nowhere near like directional or one thing in the slightest kind of thing. And so the result was that I felt overwhelmed, unfocused, and I didn't move that needle in any direction in my life. It's like you'd show up for the things that were the most important. And, much like the people that were working for Garry, it's like I got a lot of things done every week and I was busy all the time. But I was never making any real progress, particularly with my writing career, because my attention was just so fractured and I had way too many things on my plate. So, when this book came into my life and I read those words, it was nothing short of like feeling like I got smacked upside the head. You just really sort of take this audit of your life and you realize that you are spread way too thin. And I will be honest with you, I didn't have a solution for it at the time. Like, I didn't know how to untangle myself from all the many commitments, but I will say I did know that I needed to figure out how to do that. And so untangling myself became my one thing for a really long time. And so because it was like, I am doing way too many things, I don't know how to say no. Like, that was a lesson I needed to learn. I needed to learn how to say no, so that I could say yes to the things in my life that I did want to be doing. And that was hard and it took time. And I would like to tell you, I read this book and then like completely my life changed overnight, but that's just not true. Like, there's a lot of behaviors, there's a lot of thinking and psychology that's very deep rooted, and why, somebody like me became a people pleaser in the first place, and why it was difficult for me to say no and to feel like I'm letting other people down. When really what I was doing the whole time was just letting myself down. So that was a huge shift. It took time. It took years, and I will say it's actually even something to this day that I need to continually be thinking about, so it's like, what am I saying yes to? What am I saying no to? And I'm trying to keep my focus as narrow as possible so that I can be moving the needle in those domains of my life in which I want to be progressing, I want to have growth, and I want to see success. So it doesn't happen overnight, but I think it definitely helps us to think about how we spend our time, where we spread ourselves too thin, and come up with a plan for what can we do about it. The second idea I want to share with you from this book is the domino effect. So in 1983, Lauren Whitehead wrote in the American Journal of Physics, a single domino is capable of bringing down another domino that is 50% larger. And so you may have seen this. I'm almost positive there's like short YouTube videos out there that kind of demonstrate this, but you could start with a very small domino and then increase the size of each of those dominoes after it by 50% so that they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And, within just a short amount of time, your small domino that you have pushed over has knocked over one. I think it's within like 5 or 6 dominoes, one that is basically the size of, an adult male kind of thing. So there's just the power in, that focus, the physics of, the single direction, and just being able to, apply that force in a singular direction consecutively can be really powerful. Garry shares in the book that it's important to find your lead domino and whack away at it until it falls. And so, of course you have to sort of figure out where do you want to focus your energy? And so, I think sometimes I read productivity books or I watch other YouTube productivity channels and things like that. And, let's be honest, a lot of them are kind of younger males kind of thing. Some of them have families, some of them don't, but I don't often hear many of them speaking. I don't know exactly what happens behind closed doors, but about being a primary caregiver sort of in their homes. And so I think it's always important whenever I share information on here to share that, my children are grown now, they're 20 and 21, so everything's a lot different. But, while they were growing up, I was that primary caregiver. I was working a full-time job. I was still trying to pursue a career in writing, and it's hard. But I will also say it's not impossible, so you have to sort of continue to pursue that thing that you want, even if it doesn't look exactly like everybody else who has that freedom of time and that they don't have other kind of obligations that just absolutely cannot be given up. You just cannot give up that obligation of taking care of your kids every day. It's not an option. You can't give up that obligation necessarily of having to work that career that is the one that is providing your main source of income. So you're gonna have to do the best you can with the time that you do have available. And certainly being very focused about what your one thing is and locating your lead domino so that when you direct all of your attention, your focus, your energy towards your lead domino, you are getting all of your momentum lined up to sort of consecutively knock down that next domino and the next domino and the next domino. Garry says in the book, extraordinary success is sequential, not simultaneous. So the way I can kind of relate this to my own pursuit of a successful writing career is that it was absolutely imperative. Back in 2016, when I first got this book, I needed to make some decisions. I needed to decide, look, what genre do you want to write in? What projects do you want to be working on? And what is the one project that you're going to work on to completion and finish before you begin that next domino? And this idea of, like, for me in my head, it's like they're dominoes, but they're books, right? So this is the book I'm focusing on right now. I'm getting this book written and ready, and I'm pushing it out the door so that when my next book is ready, it goes over, and the next goes over, and the next goes over, and they're lined up. They're in the same genre. They're attracting the same audience, and you're hopefully building a base of readers for life. So it was huge for me, to just sort of like envision that in my head, because while I did have all these other things, even at that time, that I was unable to, I'm not going to stop being a mom, nor do I want to be. I couldn't stop being a school psychologist then, although I have done that now. It made a tremendous difference once I got my writing life focused and I had determined what my lead domino was. And I had determined that my lead domino was the books that I most love to read, which are domestic and psychological thrillers. So there's my focus. That's what my books are about. And one can lead to the next, which can lead to the next, and I can get those dominoes knocked over. The third idea from this book that I want to share with you is one product, one service, one passion, one skill. And so this gets into when I was really kind of struggling with, do I give up school psychology? Can I be successful as I want to be as a career writer if I'm still, working all the time as a school psychologist? And this one was harder. This one took longer, for sure. And I'll tell you, because, it's a lot of times, and I know many of you out there are the same way, we're passionate about many things. We are actually good at many things. We can be successful in many different ways. And so I think sometimes it can be difficult to give up a career, particularly when, I went to an additional 4 years plus an internship, additional 4 years of grad school after my undergrad and an internship to pursue this career in school psychology. So, there was a huge time and money investment in it. And, I actually was good at that job. People would call me, see if I'm available, because we'd had a lot of success working together in the past. And so I think it can be difficult when you have multiple passions in that way, to sort of decide, what direction. It can also be tempting to imagine you can successfully juggle all of those things. And maybe this one is a little bit up for debate. I think it's the hardest for people to swallow. It's the one that I kind of go back and forth with most frequently. I will tell you, in the end of the day, I decided that Garry was right, that there was simply no way I was going to see the level of success with my writing career that I wanted, so long as I was spending the majority of my time, cognitive energy, and just brain cells working as a school psychologist all day long. Was I able to kind of limp along and continue to write books and get them published and find an agent and all those things? Absolutely, yes. But it was slow. It was painful at times, and it felt scattered. It felt more overwhelming than it would if that was just kind of what I was, most focused on, for sure. Now, please know, it's not like I was able to just quit my job and switch over to writing full time. I still needed that additional income from a job. One thing I did to kind of problem solve around that is that I realized, well, sure, you still need to work a job. However, is there another job that you could do that is not as cognitively demanding on you? So, with school psychology, you're doing a lot of testing, you're doing a lot of analyzing, you're writing a lot of reports, you're doing a lot of observations. It's kind of a lot of heavy cognitive lifting. And so then when it comes to writing your books, it's sometimes you just don't have anything left in the well. You're really, really drained. You're mentally exhausted, kind of thing. So I found that by switching to a career that I actually love, I went back to working as a flight attendant, I can become physically tired. It's not the same thing as that cognitive exhaustion. And so then, even when I'm tired physically, I still have mental energy, if that makes sense, in order to be creative and work on my books. And so I think that has been like the perfect kind of solution for me. And so I guess I would say is like, well, yes, sure, maybe you're not in a place right now where you can just completely give up, that primary source of income that you need in order to support yourself and your family. But is there something else that you can do that, would still bring in the income, but is maybe not going to be quite as demanding on you, however that equation works for you, so that you are able to become more and more and more focused about your one thing, your one product, one service, one passion, your one skill, kind of thing. And that sometimes we have to make hard decisions about giving up something that we are very good at, and maybe we enjoy it, but where do we want to be in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? And that to me was the key right there, is that I knew in 5 years, it would be fine if I was a school psychologist, but it would be devastating to me if I wasn't a writer and I didn't have a bookshelf filled with the books I had created over the past 5 years. If in 20 years I hadn't done it at all, I would have regrets. And that's like a number one thing for me. It's like I'm not going to die with regrets. I will be completely fine with if I'm on my deathbed and I'm like, I tried, I didn't quite get as far towards my goals as I would have liked. I would be completely fine with saying, look, I tried as much as I could. I did everything within my power that I knew I could to pursue and go after this thing that I was passionate about. And for me, it's creating books. But one thing I want to point out, like I said earlier, I bought this book in 2016. It's 2024. That's 8 years, okay? And I have been shifting and molding and changing and kind of like working the clay of my life over these last 8 years, knowing that something wasn't quite right, knowing I wanted to do something else, but not ever having just a clear sense of, okay, well, how do I do that? What does it look like? I want to sort of stress and point out that it all came together, and it continues to come together by being curious, by reading books that other people have generously put out into the world to share their life experience, their theories on things, how something worked for them, which is exactly what I'm doing here on part of this YouTube channel, right? Is sharing information with you about things that have worked for me, things that I have learned over the years that have helped me create a life that I am ever more passionate about every single day. I just don't think there's any better way to spend a life than in pursuit and in alignment with what is meant for you. What are you meant to be doing? And, it can take some time. It can take some processing. It can take some journaling and answering some hard questions, to sometimes get to that lead domino, right? But once you know it, once you can see your lead domino and you can see how all the other dominoes are going to line up behind it, that clarity of focus has been absolutely a game changer in my life. So, no matter what I'm doing, whether I'm making a YouTube video, whether I'm writing my next book, whether I'm putting out my newsletter, all of it is in alignment with my domino of writing books that people are going to love and that I'm going to be proud for having created. And at the end of my life, I want to see a bookshelf full of all the books that I have created, over the course of my life. So I want you to know, no matter where you are in your own life journey, questions you may have, things that are difficult, you may not have any sense of what your lead domino is going to be, but I absolutely believe that, through some focused questioning, taking some time to really kind of look at the lay of your land, considering all the different ways that you may be spreading yourself much thinner than you need to, right? Like we're all going to be kind of spread. We all have a lot of hats that we have to wear, particularly those of us that are parents and need to work and all these other things. You have a lot of hats, but maybe you don't need to be doing quite so many things for each of those roles. And so I'd go back to what Garry said, at the very beginning of his book. And what is the one thing you can do this week such that by doing it, everything else would be easier or unnecessary? And ask yourself that question maybe even every day. What is the one thing I can do today that is going to have the biggest impact, that is going to make everything else easier, and just kind of lead from that every day. What's the essential thing? What's the biggest ticket item? And don't allow yourself to get pulled into a million different directions by busy work that isn't moving the needle. Thanks for being here. That's all I have for this video. If you want to get the book, it's available everywhere. I highly recommend it. It's one I keep on my shelf nearby, and I pull it out again and again and again. And I'm always getting a new takeaway and some new learning from it. Once again, I'm Rebecca Taylor, best-selling author of psychological and domestic thrillers. I hope you'll check out my books. The latest one, Once Upon a Lie, is available wherever books are sold. My new release, coming out October of 2024, The Last Nanny. You can find the pre-order link for that, along with all my other books, in the description below. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.